Hello, my name is Karla Capacetti, and I am here to speak about the yoga of being. My lecture is called Discovering Divine Union with a Treatment-Free Practice. Before we get started, I just want to call in the support of my spirit guides, seen and unseen helpers, and all beneficent beings who have brought us together to this space to talk about bees and hope that they get better over time. So, introducing me, my bee name is Bee Tree Yogi. I'm on Instagram as Bee Tree Yogi, but I'm a first-generation beekeeper, and I'm an herbalist, and I've studied with the College of the Melissa for a year. Y'all might know Laura B. Ferguson. She's come to this conference several times. My bee journey started, I think, since I was little. My aunt was a professional clown in Puerto Rico, where my family is from, and her name was Honeybee. And I recently, in the last few years, discovered a picture of us together, and it just like clicked to me. Holy crap! The bees have been with me for a long time. I started learning about bees in 2011 during college. I was working at a community garden, and there was a beekeeper with hives there, and I got to meet them, not up close and personal, but just from the outside, and they were so fascinating just from that vantage point. And then I started keeping my own bees in 2014. My first hive died within a few months, probably, because I was too scared to be with them, really. I was covered up and had all my gloves, and it just was really awkward and obnoxious to them, probably. So I was super unprepared for them. The following year, in 2015, I got 2 colonies, and I wasn't expecting the one to survive that survived. The one that I thought was going to be weaker actually was amazing, and I'm in my, cross my fingers, 4th season with this, I guess 4th season with them, or 3rd, one or the other. But so in that year, that first year with 2 hives, I ended up combining the bees because one of them was weak and one of them was strong. And the first time I experienced an intuitive call to be with the bees and to work from my inner knowing was when I combined the bees. I felt really terrible about killing one of the queens, even though she wasn't laying right and she wasn't going to make it. I killed her with my fingers, and then I ate her. And I felt that was my way of honoring her. It felt really terrible to toss her or dig her and put her in the ground. I wanted her to come through me. So that was the beginning of my shamanic bee practices. So the talk is about yoga and bees, and if you're anything like me, you've been longing for a connection to some higher source of creation at some point in your life, or like me, on an everyday basis. Maybe you want to be fully present to the mystery of life without really doubting that there is an existence or embodiment of a greater power. You might be seeking a version of your own truth that resonates with you. You might be looking for a sense of belonging in the world. In my experience and in the people that I've spoken to, whether it's about bees or just life in general, they're always, yearning for that connection to source. And the 2 practices that have connected me to that source of creation is devoting time to the bees and devoting time to yoga. A third one would be devoting time to medicine making and being with plants, but I think all those 3 things go together, but today I'm going to focus on the bees and not the plants. So both of these practices are about understanding myself and understanding the world around me. So yoga means to yoke or union, to bring together, and we often interpret this as the union of body, mind, and spirit. And in fact, combining and bringing those 3 aspects of ourselves together is what connects us to that higher power. So I want to read a poem that I wrote about the bees that I combined. It's called Take Your Losses in the Fall, or Smoke Signals. I've prayed about this day, unsure of the outcome, certain of the risk. Gentle steps approach her castle made of gold, offerings of gratitude from the roots of the earth. White smoke signals change. The disruption is inevitable. The abduction occurs without fear, and she sacrifices her future willingly. Confusion consumes the whole. Sisters, oops, I don't know how to scroll this down. Where did my pen go? Ah, well, I don't know how to.
Presentation.
Did on auto advance?
No, I'm just trying to find my mouse so that I can scroll over. I'm in presenter mode. Well, that just ruined the vibe. Okay, so she sacrifices her future willingly. Confusion consumes the whole. Sisters awaken to a mother in peril. Daughters crawl in search of the source. Goddesses soar throughout the sky. An angel has fallen. Her life shines light in dark places. Her heart beats to the eternal rhythm. Her love reigns true forever. So that was a poem that kind of came through after having that experience with the bees. My second and third hives. So in my experience, the honeybee superorganism is just such a beautiful embodiment of this higher power, superior being. And she's really capable of translating the love language of the land into medicine for the entire web of life. So I was actually flipping through Dee's book, which is new to me, and I can't wait to read it. And in it, there are pictures of the cube and the super, and like how the shape of the hexagon is actually a cube. And so recently, Laura B., who's my teacher at the College of the Melissa, she has been having a lot of downloads from her time in Ephesus, from some higher power, I'm not sure, the goddess Artemis. And so we've been really playing with this idea of the honeybee superorganism. It's an organism within an organism within an organism. The honeybee itself is an individual with alchemical gifts to transform nature into medicine within the chambers of her body. She's part of the whole nest, which is encapsulated within itself through the creation of wax and comb for brood and food and prayer. And finally, the whole environmental network in which she is in a constant flow of co-creation. So like the divine, she is the one that expresses herself as the many. And I began to explore my relationship to this creature, not only with the information that was coming to me from outside world, science and just the media and everything, but really wanting to tune into my own inner knowing with, how to interact with the bee. And anyone can attune to this intuition or inner knowing with the practice of yoga. Because that is, after all, the purpose, to yoke, to union, to bring together, to marry our inner and outer realms of perception. And in my experience, the bee can lead us. In my experience, the honeybee can lead us into the caverns of ourselves. And someone, I think it was Robert, yesterday, I said the word hive when I was referring to a wild colony, and he said, it's not a hive, it's a nest. And he's only the second person ever to correct me in that way. And so really thinking about the bee, whether she's in a white box or whether she's in a tree, as a nest, and thinking of it as we make the relationship between the nest and the womb. So in my version or my interpretation of yoga, it's really about weaving together the heart, the mind, and the womb within the concept of womb, of creation. So this isn't limited to only women or females, but really all of us come from a womb, and so we are all connected to it. And so the one being is just, the whole thing, not just the bee, not just the nest, but the whole network that she weaves together. And I believe that if we allow that relationship with the one being to develop in a way that really puts love out into all directions, we might be able to renew our connection to the divine for ourselves and for everything, for the entire everything. And if you haven't read it yet, I really One book that really stood out to me was Jacqueline Freeman's The Song of Increase, in which she talks about the honeybees infusing their prayers into honey. And I just think that's such a beautiful imagery to think about, especially Mark, I think, was saying that, the honey we get at the store is crap, it's just sugar water, and to really put a price on it that reflects not only the amount of effort that you put into it, but the amount of effort that the bees put into it, and just, what it is. It's the nectar of the earth. So really finding value in that. So the overview for today's class is I'm going to guide you through a 5 senses awareness meditation. If you're comfortable with that, it'll be short. And then introduce you to the 6-fold path of sacred beekeeping within the College of the Melissa. And also introduce the 7 treatment-free practices, or 7 of them that I have worked with, and also Patanjali's 8 limbs of yoga. And so I'll be weaving together the 7 treatment-free practices and the 8 limbs of yoga together. And I promise it's not a math class. We've already talked about exponents, and there's 5, 6, 7, 8. It's not math, but maybe it is. Okay, so if you are comfortable, please close your eyes and find your way to a comfortable position on your chair. You might want to sit towards the front. Put your feet on the ground if possible. Begin to take a few natural breaths at your own pace. And on your next inhale, begin to bring that breath to your eyes. You might want to slightly open your eyes so that they're half open, half closed. And begin to take in the colors around you, what you see, but don't try to label it. Just allow it to be present. And in your next breath, begin to direct that energy to your ears. And thank your sweet ears for allowing all of the sounds in this room to reverberate throughout this space. But again, don't try to label or identify what they are. Just allow them to be. And you might be able to also expand that awareness to the place in which we are, this campground. And expand it a little bit further to the city. And slowly bring your awareness back to this room. And then your next breath, allow all of the smells and aromas that are all around you to enter your realm of perception. Again, without trying to label them or identify them, just allowing them to be. And in your next breath, moving your energy and your focus and your attention to your mouth, your taste buds, the roof of your mouth, your cheeks, your lips, and just thank them for all of the work that they do for you. And this would be a good time to follow the swallow and go deep into your gut and thank all of the microorganisms in our bellies that help us break down all of the foods that we consume and move all those nutrients to other parts of our bodies. And in your next breath, become aware of your skin, the way it sits on the chair, the way the breeze comes through. And you can even begin to imagine all of the millions of pores all over your body, allowing air to come through, in and out, through our skin, regenerating itself continuously. And in your next few breaths, just allowing all of your senses, all of the sensations that have come through to just be. Again, not trying to identify or label, but just becoming present. And when you're ready, open your eyes slowly. Thank you. I just wanted to set the tone for this conversation and align our senses to bring us all into a higher level of consciousness as we explore these more esoteric and philosophical aspects of treatment-free practice. These are my bees. I spilled some honey in the hive and they were recuperating it. So, the College of the Melissa. I met Laura B. in 2015 at Joshua Tree. We were at a shamanic Way of the Bee workshop, and we immediately gravitated towards each other. And she told me that she has a whole college just for beekeeping, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I need. So the program itself is a 10-month program. It's all online, and we have, so far it's only been women, but we are super open to anyone coming and joining us. And the purpose of the college is to reawaken the feminine principles as understood and expressed by the priestesses of the ancient world. So mostly Greek. Melissa means honeybee in Greek. If you didn't know that, I'm sure you did. In ancient times, the temple priestesses were known as Melissae, or honeybees, and they maintained the connection to source through mysticism, divination, and ceremony. And this is relevant today because our earth, our mother, is changing, and it's pretty impossible to deny that she's changing in some way. Last week I was flying over Greenland and Canada and noticed all these beautiful sheets of ice, but then I noticed the giant cracks in them, and I was thinking, 10 years ago, these cracks probably weren't as big, and in 10 years, who knows if they'll even still be, together. So there were some young boys sitting on the airplane next to me, and I was just like, you guys have to come see this because it may not be around. So my role as a modern Melissae, or priestess of the bee, is to midwife the earth and her children into a new world and into a new way of being. So we talk about in the college, we really bring together people from all over to weave together our dreams and become the channel between the dreams that become the channel between our heart and minds. And these practices can be undertaken by anyone, regardless of gender, but the purpose of them is to reawaken the feminine principles. And we do this by dancing and singing and drumming and remembering, and really just bridging the language between spirit and self through a common ethics and devotion to developing our intuition. So in the college, we work with a sixfold path. It includes science, sacred, herstory, and history, which is together, mystery, art, medicine, and activism. For science, we ask the question, how does science serve the past, present, and future of beekeeping? Being here with all of you guys has just really reawakened my excitement for research and for science. I got my Master's of Science in Sustainable Food Systems a few years ago, and since then I've been working and haven't really done a whole lot of research and focus on learning from a scientific perspective. So thank you for reigniting my fire on that. The next one is sacred. So what is sacred and how do we demonstrate its value? That's the first thing we pretty much ask anyone who joins the college, and every person has their own definition, and throughout the year we refine our understanding and develop a common language and practice. For history and history, how is our history reflected, confined, or supported by our history? We look back as far as we can for moments in our Earth story that shifted the presence of the feminine principles. And, you know, we are in a place in time right now where we are acknowledging that patriarchy has really been the driving force in our recent history, and how do we bring that back into balance? How do we marry the feminine and the masculine, the patriarchal and the matriarchal, to create a system that works for everybody? With the mystery, there's so many mysteries in life, and how do we authentically explore that with modern relevance? At the college, we go through the whole cycles of life, death, regeneration with the honeybee by looking to her for understanding, and you know, she's been around for a really long time, so she's a good source of information for us. And we also look through mythological explanations and apply those lessons to our everyday lives. Bless you. With art medicine, how does the honeybee inspire us to live our art and become our own medicine? I loved the apitherapy talk last night, and I think that is definitely one aspect of it. The honeybee is, again, a symbol of creation, and she offers everything she does is medicine. So she's continuously recreating herself and healing herself if we allow her the space to do so. So in the college, we also make ceremonial crafts for healing ourselves and the collective. And so some of these ceremonial crafts are, they're like, well, we do lots of different things. You can go online and find out. But really it's like temple arts. You know, we're trying to recreate the temples of the ancient world, and so what did they have available to them for getting in touch with spirit? And finally, with activism, how do your individual gifts contribute to the greater good? Each student learns to use their own authentic voice in service to the honeybee, and this lecture is kind of my capstone from last year. So this is the first time I'm putting this out into the world, so thank you for being my guinea pigs. And it's more than just about the bee. It's about sovereignty, and I think treatment-free practice is really a way to make the bee more sovereign in her own space without us constantly meddling inside her. And this, again, is the sovereignty of the feminine principle, and we've been seeing in the news over and over all these conversations about consent, conversations about Me Too, the Me Too movement, and so I feel like the bee she's awakening this in a lot of people from my experience in the college. And this is a picture of me at the Women's March me and my friends in last year, the year before. In Washington, and I had one side said "We shall overcome" and the other side says "Be nasty." So that was pretty fun to get to represent the bee in a movement that was for women. Any questions about the sixfold path? Cool. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to weave these into the 8 limbs of yoga. So don't worry about getting them all now. But I will just let you know, they are the 7 practices that I want to introduce today are setting your intentions as a sacred beekeeper or treatment-free beekeeper, apiary yoga, which there may or may not be demonstrations of, breathe like a bee, 5 senses awareness, which we just did, and I'll go into it a little bit more, but the point of that was just to become more aware of what's around us so that we can also become aware of what's inside of us. 5 is candle gazing, 6 is journeying with the one being, and 7 is mantra. Okay, so who in here has practiced yoga before? Awesome! that's great. And I'm assuming the asana is the third limb of yoga, and it's the most common one. Asana is the postures, the movement. But on either side of that, there's a lot more to yoga. It is definitely, the postures will bring you closer. It's a step in here, so it'll bring you closer to the divine, but really practicing the 8 of these together is what will lead to a bigger relationship with the divine. So the 7 or the 8 limbs are the yamas, which are restraints and moral vows, the niyamas, duties or observances, and these first 2 are kind of the values of living a yogic lifestyle. One is for the inner world and one is for the outer world. Asana is the comfortable postures. Pranayama is breath control and freedom. Pratyahara is sense withdrawal. Dharana is focused concentration, and dhyana is meditative absorption. Samadhi is the final step, which is union with the divine. And I will go into these more. So, the yamas are restraints or moral vows. They are composed of 5 different aspects, and the yamas are how we express ourselves outwardly and how we interact with the world around us. So, ahimsa is nonviolence, and this is definitely a huge pillar in sacred beekeeping, and I believe in also treatment-free beekeeping. It's nonviolence. So it's basically asking us to not injure or be cruel to creatures or people. So we work with the honeybee with the intention to do no harm and to perpetuate good in the world. And we approach the bee nest with kindness, friendliness, and thoughtful consideration. Satya is truthfulness, and as sacred beekeepers, we speak the truth when we engage with our bees. Whether it's an individual nest or an apiary or even just walking into the woods. We believe as yogis that honest communication is the foundation for healthy relationships with our communities, with ourselves, with our people. And for me, when I install a package or am catching a swarm, I try to set an intention, and that intention might be, I want to learn about swarms from this nest, or I want to learn about splitting, or I want to harvest honey and beeswax and use it for medicine for my community, or my intention just might be to meet the queen, and that's it. But it's really important for me and for the people who I work with who also practice bee yoga. There aren't very many of us that I know of, but I'm hoping there will be more. It is important to set your intention, and there's an old saying, telling the bees, and I had a really hard conversation with my bees in North Carolina. I have, like I said, if they make it through the spring, it'll be the 4th season with them. If they make it through the winter, it'll be the 4th spring with this lineage of bees. And I was really sad to have to leave them, but I told them I'm going to the West Coast for a little while. I don't know when I'll be back, and they took it okay. So just being honest and truthful with your bees about what you're doing with them and how you're going to work with them. Asteya is non-stealing, which is a tricky one for beekeepers because when we take their honey, we're kind of stealing from them. We're stealing their food and their nourishment. And as a disclaimer, I've only been beekeeping for a very short amount of time, and I don't do it for my living. So I totally understand and know that a lot of you in here are doing it for your livelihood, and that's where I think the second one, truthfulness, is really important. If it is for your livelihood, set that intention with your bees. I want to work with you so that I can sustain all parts of myself, not just the fun part of beekeeping, not just the spiritual part, but the monetary aspect too, because bees over time have represented abundance and wealth. So why not, work with them for your own livelihood? But again, it's important to establish a trusting relationship with your bees and not take what isn't freely given. So again, this conversation about consent with the honeybee as a feminine creature. So again, doing no harm and truthfulness. Working with these 3 yamas are definitely a way to be in right relation with your bees. I've actually never harvested honey from my bees, not more than like that much, because they never have enough for me to take. So I need to do some practice to see, you know, is it just that they don't want to produce a whole lot of honey? Are they only producing for themselves? But again, just being sure that when we're harvesting honey, we're telling them that we're going to do it and we're leaving enough for them to survive. And some other things that you can do are avoid taking virgin comb if you're harvesting beeswax. I'm sure all of you do that. But, you know, taking the comb that's 1 or 2 years old so that they can create their own new comb, and also saving propolis. I've seen beekeepers, and it breaks my heart, they just like scrape the propolis off and just throw it. And I'm like, I need to pick all of that up because this is magic right here, it's medicine. And just having some awareness and some reverence for what the bees have created for you is a way of not stealing. The 4th one is brahmacharya. I don't speak Sanskrit, so excuse my pronunciations. So this is about the right use of sexual energy. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the honeybees are very sexual, sensual beings. They make love to every single flower that they visit. And they channel that energy to create for the highest good. And so the yogi that's practicing brahmacharya is taking on the responsibility of using their creative energy, their sexual power, for the highest good. And as sacred beekeepers, we can do this by tapping into our own creative energy to create a positive impact in the world. So it's not just about sex, it's about using the energy that flows through us to create life, to create abundance and love and prosperity for all. The final one is aparigraha, non-hoarding and non-attachment. And again, I'm guilty of being a honey hoarder. Everywhere I go in the world, I have to buy at least 1 jar of honey because it's the magic of that land. It's the language of that land. And so I need to work on that. With Asteya, so this relates back to Asteya, which is the nonviolence, and we only take what is necessary without exploiting the bee. So the yogi feels that hoarding implies that there's a lack of faith in the divine, and that by hoarding, we are doubting that we will be taken care of moment to moment. And this also relates to hoarding our attachments to certain outcomes, and forgetting that change is the only constant. So as sacred beekeepers, we recognize that the honeybee is a superorganism to a higher power, and she's constantly flowing in that cycle of life, death, and regeneration. So losing a hive or dealing with infestations is not the end of the world, even though it is definitely heartbreaking. And I haven't experienced it at the level that probably some of you have, especially as working with bees for your livelihood. But the bees have taught me multiple times that it's not the end of the world when one nest dies, because they will regenerate themselves in the bigger picture. So those are the yamas. Any questions about the yamas? Do any of these resonate with you, or have you practiced these in any way without knowing it, or does anything come up?
People ask me about taking honey from the bees. I admit I am robbing it from them. We call it robbing. Mm-hmm. Always try to leave enough for the bees, and be respectful of them. It's in the commercial beekeeping setting, it's kind of looked down upon to be sensitive to the bees, or just like you said with the propolis scraping it, and just disrespecting the hard work they do. I think as you become a beekeeper and you start falling in love with the bees, you start becoming more truthful with your intent in keeping bees. And I find myself having to remind myself why am I doing it, just like you said. Mm-hmm. And it resonates deeply with me. And I try to communicate that with other people so that people just don't see every commercial beekeeper as someone just to exploit honeybees.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
I call it harvesting. And again, it's and keeping in mind that in my mind there's a lot of the harvest, and that is that there's going to be some work that goes before that, and if that work isn't accomplished and if somebody didn't do it, then there is a harvest. The bees do a lot of that work.
Absolutely.
I always find it interesting when I tell people I'm a beekeeper and they say, "Oh, so you make honey?"
Like, no, I don't make honey. It's impossible. I don't.
I steal honey.
Yeah, and I think just being honest about that and is a really good step in having a right relation with the bees.
I see it as a privilege to get to witness.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know which one that is.
If you're saving grains of honey to feed back to the bees, it's definitely a different situation than taking honey
Absolutely.
and giving them syrup back.
Absolutely, because every nest is going to be different in terms of how much food they need. So when Laura Bee gave me a colony, a nest to foster, she gave me a frame of honey that she had kept in her freezer, and it wasn't honey from that hive particularly, so there's that, you're sharing honey between nests. That could be dangerous, but one thing that I wrote in here that I didn't actually say is putting it away and don't sell it or don't process it until that the bees are done with it. So thank you. So the niyamas are the positive observances that we use to look inward into ourselves. So it means rules or laws, and it represents the attitude we have for ourselves. So these are a little bit more intimate and personal than the yamas, but just as relevant and important. So saucha is cleanliness, and that conversation's been coming up several times. As sacred beekeepers, we keep our tools as clean as possible between inspections and between every nest. And I didn't know that a couple years ago, and recently have been trying to figure out the best way to clean everything. And I liked the blowtorch idea. I thought that was pretty cool because I know even using alcohol that can turn off the bees and might upset them because it's a really strong smell. Do you have a recommendation for cleaning tools?
Blowtorch.
Blowtorch and a wet cloth to wipe off. Because once you heat up the propolis and everything,
It starts melting.
it melts and then it just kind of runs out of the tool. So you hit it with a wet cloth afterwards, and that tool is like right out of the box.
Awesome. I'll have to get me one of those for sure.
Put mine in my smoker, open it up,
Yeah.
put it in the smoker, let it sit there for a while until it heats up, pull it out, clean that side off with a piece of burlap, which I'm just going to throw back in the smoker. Flip it around, put the other end. You gotta be careful not to get it too hot. That's
Sweet.
kind of my quick and easy way.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So that's so the saucha, the cleanliness, purity aspect is both an inward and an outward one. So the outward way that we can be clean beekeepers is to clean our tools, but then the inward reflection of cleanliness is regarding the clarity of our body vessels and our minds to help with the next two limbs of yoga, which are the asana and the pranayama, the movement and the breath. So the practice of yoga in its entirety is about union with the divine, but in order to become to be unified with the divine, there needs to be space for that to happen. So the cleanliness is both inward and outward. And we, as sacred beekeepers, work towards cultivating an energy inside of us that can help overcome and remove the collective disturbing or overwhelming emotions in our society around hatred, fear, and greed. And I also interpret this to mean that we advocate for people's preconceived perceptions of what honeybees do or what they are. And so thank you for all of the educational work that you're doing, especially starting with the little ones. Working to cleanse our tools and also our inner perceptions. The second is santosha, contentment. And I feel like this is also, it's been a difficult one for me, especially because it can be really hard and heartbreaking to do treatment-free beekeeping. We might lose a hive, or we might not catch the swarm, or we might kill a few bees or smush the queen on accident. And I know for me, there were several years of, oh, if only I did this, I would be such a better beekeeper, or I'm a terrible beekeeper because my bees died. But Santosha, this idea of contentment and modesty and accepting what we have, is about accepting where you are in your journey of treatment-free beekeeping and sacred beekeeping. So for me, a helpful practice is to offer gratitude to the bees and to the relationship that you are developing with the one being. So over and over and over time, developing this gratitude will help you become more just accepting of where you are in your journey and not be so hard on yourself. Tapas is the third one, and it refers to the fire of desire, and it's about burning the desires we experience and having the discipline to express those desires. So in yoga, the ultimate desire is to be in union with the divine. And the tapas energy is the fire that burns away the desires that stand in the way of that goal. So some examples in the yogic philosophy are how we eat, how we breathe, our body posture. And for me, as a new beekeeper, especially at the beginning, there's always this desire to just like open the box and go in there and look around and move stuff around, and like I had to be active if I was going to be a good beekeeper, and I had to be in there all the time because it's really cool and fun and magical to see what they're doing. But I learned eventually that that is an important part of becoming a beekeeper, is knowing what's inside. You can't just like plop a box down and your first hive and just expect it to be great and expect to learn everything from only standing outside. So it is an important aspect to go in and relate with your bees, but it's also that desire eventually will burn away. For me, it has, and once I was able to let go of that desire, my relationship with the one being really expanded, because I did have more tools and skills developed to work with the bee from the outside. So that may or may not resonate, but I hope that some of the practices that I introduce over the next 30 minutes, help with that. So the fourth one is svadhyaya, self-reflection or self-study. And it is a pillar of sacred beekeeping because we are continuously turning inwards to become present, even to the point of accepting our limitations. So it helps to burn away these self-destructive tendencies. And I tend to do this by journaling, writing poetry, about my experiences with the bees, and keeping records over time about what I've learned from each hive and each nest. And one example of this was I woke up one morning from this weird dream, and 5 seconds later, a friend texted me and said, "There's a swarm in the forest, go get it." And I was like, "Yes, oh my gosh." And I had literally just bought my first ventilated veil, and I was like, "Yes, I'm so prepared. I have my nuke box, I have everything I need." And I took this swarm from the forest, and I wasn't aware, I don't know if there were any, I don't think there were bees nearby, so I'm pretty sure it was a swarm from the forest, because they would have had to travel pretty far. I loved her immediately. Frida, Queen of the Forest. She was the strongest and fastest nest builder I've ever seen. She was just like zipping through, building comb and laying babies. But within like 2 months, I noticed that the population was quickly dwindling. And when I went in for inspection, I found several bees with like 3 mites on each of them. And I was just like, what do I do? Everyone was like, treat them. And I was like, I have 4 other colonies, 4 other nests in my apiary. There's no way I'm going to treat them. So I went into deep self-reflection and meditation, and several dreams came through, and ultimately I was asked by the bees, I believe, to sacrifice them and to burn the brood, and that was really heartbreaking and sad. So the moral of the story, Frida says, is for me, one, don't steal bees from the forest and try to put them in a box, because that's just not going to work. They were not happy. And the other is that death and heartbreak are all part of the arc of being a sacred beekeeper. And ultimately, having her as a teacher and having this experience as a teacher has really brought me into a deeper understanding of the one being, and I carry her very close to my heart. I really wanted to learn from her. I was so excited to learn from her, or observe characteristics that were unique to the forest bees. But she taught me, don't put me in a box. So that's self-reflection. Isvara pranidaha, surrender to a higher power. It's the final niyama. And this is also about, so it means to lay all actions at the feet of God or goddess, so that we can become attuned to the will of the divine. It is a celebration of the spiritual. And with the guidance of this niyama, we begin to attune ourselves to the divine powers of the superorganism, one being. So like I said, she's been around for a really long time and has been in relationship with humans for a really long time. So for me, whatever force, whatever guides this creature to continue communing with us after so long, I pray that it continues. And this is a daily practice, the surrender to a higher power, as sacred beekeeping. Daily practice is known as sadhana in Sanskrit, and it's really a way of recognizing on a daily basis that we are both being guided by a larger force and that we have a divine role to play in this story. So for the yamas and niyamas, my practice that I recommend, the first one is setting your inner and outer intentions for sacred beekeeping or treatment-free beekeeping. So that involves defining your values, and those might be exactly what the yamas and niyamas have outlined for you. It might also include bee centricity and integrity and truth and freedom and flow. Whatever works for you, just taking a moment, taking 20 minutes to think about it and write it down could potentially, every time you go into your apiary, when you set yourself up, these are the 5 things that I care most about as a beekeeper, and living those through your practice. And in yoga, my teacher, Michelle Cassandra Johnson, she says, how can we live social justice and yoga on and off the mat? And so I pose the same question. How can you live yoga both in the apiary and out of the apiary? So for me, that's defining your values and committing to the journey of transformation, because it's definitely transformed me, and it's amazing to hear stories of people in here who have transitioned their apiaries to treatment-free because they just knew that's better. It's better for the bees, it's better for you, it's better for everybody. Any questions about the yamas or niyamas? Sweet. So, asana is the third limb of yoga, and it is the one that we're most familiar with, most likely, comfortable and steady posture. It means to stay or abide to ourselves so that we can move into an inner essence of being. With the practice of asana, we can explore and work with our emotions, our faith, our concentration, and begin to find unity between our material worlds and our spiritual selves. So asana combined with pranayama, which is breath, which I need to take a breath real quick, actually. So working with posture and breath together, that's where most people start with yoga. That's where I started with yoga. And it has just expanded my consciousness about not only myself, but the world around me. And Patanjali's, whoever translated Patanjali's 8 Limbs of Yoga, wrote, "This down-to-earth, flesh and bones practice is simply one of the most direct and expedient ways to meet yourself. This limb of yoga practice reattaches us to our body, In reattaching ourselves to our bodies, we reattach ourselves to the responsibility of living a life guided by the undeniable wisdom of our bodies. And I really love this because the bee is such a beautiful example of living in her body. She is a being that lives in a nest, and she lives all over. You know, when she's going 4, 5, 10 miles out of her nest, that's still who she is. She's 10 miles big. And when you think about that, that's pretty spectacular, that she can be aware of where she is at all times, even if she's spread out or if she's condensed. And so as sacred beekeepers, we can use asana to experience the wisdom of our bodies. And one of my favorite practices that developed because I was kind of beekeeping and studying yoga at the same time was going outside and moving in the bee yard, which definitely slow, subtle movements, but a couple of them that are just easy to work with are mountain pose, which is grounding your feet about hip distance apart, and keeping your hands by your side and really allowing your shoulders to drop back and becoming a mountain, becoming a pillar. And this is such a beautiful practice to do, probably not when you're right in front of the hive, but definitely a few feet back, or even from behind. My favorite thing to do in the apiary is stand in mountain pose for a few minutes, a few breaths, and then just like fall onto my bees, and they like just the vibration of the nest on my heart feels so amazing. Another one is child's pose, which is laying with your shins on the ground, your ankles together. Oh, should I do it? No, I'm not going to do it. But these are the four things. Easy pose is basically just sitting in cross-leg position. Child's pose is with your chest and your head on the ground and your knees far apart or together, however feels more comfortable, with your arms stretched out. So these are really simple postures that don't take a lot of effort, but that can really keep you grounded in the earth. And I love doing it from different places in the apiary. So sitting next to the bees, sitting behind the bees, sitting 10 feet away, hearing them buzz by. I also really love to just dance through the apiary. So dancing and moving is a great practice for getting in touch with what's inside of you and with the bees.
Do you do this like in your bee suit, or?
No, just I don't really use a bee suit as much anymore. I do wear a veil, but usually if I'm not bothering them, or if I tell them, hey, I'm just coming to stretch in the yard, they don't really bother me. But if it's a busy day and they don't want me nearby, they'll definitely tell me. So I'll go a little bit further away. But yeah, just, you know, like this picture is me learning that I got accepted into my yoga program. So I was just like, I'm gonna go do yoga in the yard. That was Frida, actually. And this is my 3.5 generation colony. But yeah, so doing yoga poses in the apiary. Really fun.
It'd be cool. You know how you see on TV with the girls are on the beach and their heads, they're
Upside. Mm-hmm, like headstand?
Cool to get on top of a beehive and like.
That could be kind of cool. I'll have to ask permission for that, but yes, that sounds really fun. The other one here is sun salutations. That's a series, you can just look it up online, but it's a series of standing in mountain pose, going down to, what's it called? High lunge, not high lunge. Here, I'll just do it real quick. I'm in a skirt. One of my favorite beekeepers, her name is Beekeeping in Skirts. It's great. So sun salutation would be starting in mountain pose, raising your arms up, coming down forward fold, and then down to high plank, low plank, and you do this, or you can stay in plank, and then down dog, and walk up. So it's just doing this over and over with the bees, and it just brings your breath into your body and brings you into your body. And I think it's a great practice for me to do before I go into the colonies, into the nests, because it brings me to myself before I try to go into them. So pranayama, I think I have 15 minutes left. So pranayama is breath control and freedom. Prana is life force energy. Pranayama means to control, or it's the measuring, control, and directing of our breath to experience freedom in our body and our mind. So with asana, paired together with this practice there's so many practices of breath, of pranayama. Marrying these two together helps create space for that vital energy to flow. So with each cycle of in and out breath, we activate the tapas, the fire within us, the fire of desire, the fire of purification. And we can direct this energy to our chakras, to our different energy centers, to nourish our nervous system and our respiratory systems. So two of my favorite, which I definitely need to practice in this moment, are Brahmari, bee breath, and Ujjayi breath. Have any of you ever heard of Brahmari or practiced it? Cool. So, Brahmari is the goddess of bees in Hindu mythology, and she is said to merge the powers of the sun, moon, and earth, sacred fire, in her third eye chakra, which I love that imagery because the bees have those 3 eyes in their forehead, and so it just, to me that makes a lot of sense. It correlates to the Hindu goddess and the bees. So for Ujjayi breath, for Brahmari, it's basically a humming or a buzzing. So sit tall, shoulders relaxed, close your eyes. Take a few natural breaths, and then on your inhale, you inhale, and then on your exhale, you buzz really loud as you can. So I'm going to start. If anyone wants to join me, feel free. So cycling that over and over with each breath, inhale and then buzz, inhale and buzz. Your whole body will literally just be vibrating because it is the sound of the bee, the sound of the womb, the sound of creation, that humming buzz. The second is Ujjayi breath, and that means victorious breath, or it's also known as ocean breath, and it's becoming, it's basically breathing in and out of your nose, but with a very loud breath. You want to be able to hear it, and you want to imagine ocean waves coming through your body. So this one definitely ignites the tapas, the fire energy. So if you are feeling nervous to go into the bee nest because you know that they're feisty that day, or you have a big thing to do, like splitting or whatever you're doing with your queens, it's definitely a good breath to make you feel victorious in what you're about to accomplish. So this one sounds like... I forgot my microphone. Okay. And just practicing that for a few minutes, I even feel a lot more relaxed than I did 5 minutes ago. It helps you get into your body so that you can go into the bees again. So that's practice number 3. And it's not about necessarily controlling the breath, like putting boundaries on it, but really allowing the breath to flow freely through our bodies with these practices. So the practices are what is considered the controlling, like we're controlling where it goes, I guess. Pratyahara. This is sense withdrawal, and we already went through the 5 senses meditation, so I won't go through it again. But pratyahara translates as to withdraw oneself from that which nourishes the senses. So the practice encourages us to relinquish attachment to external stimuli and to achieve inner peace. We sever the link between our busy mind and our super senses to achieve tranquility within. In this way, our senses are no longer fed by what stimulates them, and our need to label each of them or grasp our need to label them or to grasp for them dissolves. This creates space for prana, or life force energy, to flow freely to the places that are hungriest for it. When we allow these external stimuli to control our senses and our emotions, we tend to spend a lot of energy suppressing unwanted emotions, and our minds and bodies experience imbalance or illness. So we're constantly being fed lights, colors, sounds, feelings, and it's a lot for our bodies to take in. So when we can allow it to just be and tap into all of our senses and know that they are there to bring us into our bodies rather than keeping us dispersed into all these different things that we try to label, that's what the practice is. And I feel that that's kind of what we've been doing with the honeybees and the varroa mite. We're constantly overstimulating the honeybee with weekly inspections and chemical treatments and sugar feed, and that has obviously created some sort of imbalance or illness in the superorganism. So what would happen if we stopped attacking the one being with all of these external stimuli and allowed her to really return to balance with her own being? And for me and for other sacred beekeepers, we are seekers. We're always seeking the truth. We're always searching for the next clue, the next sign that we're on the right path. But the five senses meditation allows us to just tune into the bigger picture at play and not have to, worry so much about the individual little things that are happening all around us, and really tap into that bigger truth. So for the five senses awareness, again, get into a comfortable seat and close your eyes and just go through your senses. Just scan your body for what you feel, what you smell, what you taste. And this is also a gratitude practice. So giving thanks to all of our helpers.
Okay, there's 5 minutes left, and then Bruce talks.
5 more minutes, cool. I have 3 more things. So I'll just go through the practices. Dhyana is meditative absorption, and it means to, I skipped one, sorry. Dharana, focused concentration. It means to allow all of these distractions to melt away. And so the practice that I work with for cultivating the sense of concentration is candle gazing, or in Sanskrit it's known as chatak. So you would create a space with no distractions, and I honestly love doing this in the apiary at night, whether it's a new moon or full moon or just any day, but it's dark there, so at night. Turn off the lights if you're inside and light a beeswax candle. And you want to raise the candle to eye level, so either on a bookshelf or books, and begin to focus on the candle, focus on the flame, and really begin to imagine the tapas, the desire to be anything more than you are in that moment, to melt away. And also imagine that candle flame coming from the beeswax candle as the sun, the light of the sun inside the dark nest. So we all know that the bees are harvesting the golden nectar from the flowers that comes from the sun and putting it into this dark cavern. So the candle gazing allows us to tap into the resource of the beeswax, but also concentrate on something so that we can move into the next limb of yoga, which is meditative absorption. And this means to worship or meditate with the divine. And this flows from dharana, the concentration. The one thing I wanted to introduce here was that meditating in this way, dhyana, or through dhyana, we can become more attuned with the divine. And Patanjali introduces Maya as the illusory power, or the veil that stands between us and the divine. And as we know, the honeybee is the Hymenoptera. She is a veil-winged creature. So perhaps meditating on her has the power to lift the veil that we perceive. if we can learn to devote time and attention to her existence. So journeying, this is a shamanic practice that I definitely am still practicing. It's not like a overnight thing, but it's definitely a lifelong practice. And it begins by sitting comfortably in a space with no distractions. Again, this is best done in the apiary, I feel like. And you can choose a gift to work with. So you can choose to work with honey, pollen, propolis, beeswax, whatever it is that you want to understand a little bit better. And so dhyana, meditative absorption, is really merging consciousness with the one being. So to get into this space, we want to begin by listening or drumming, listening to a drum track, or drumming yourself, or even practicing Brahmari or Ujjayi breath to hollow out so that we can become merged with the consciousness of whatever gift we're working with. So if we want to know more about this honey or know more about the bees' experience harvesting this nectar, we would merge consciousness through the drumming or through the Brahmari and put a small amount on your tongue, allow it to melt away, and just sit with it. And meditation is not about telling your thoughts to go away or to stop. It's about being present to your thoughts and allowing them to come through without going into the tunnel of next. So don't have to be perfect the first time or the second time or the 30th time, but just that practice of getting into space with this intention. Finally, samadhi is union with the divine. It's hard to describe what that feels like. It's not like you achieve it and then you're enlightened for the rest of your life. It's like you achieve it for a split second and you might not be there again for a while. But for me, the practice that works the best to get to this place is mantra. You can sit in meditation and just continuously repeat the same phrase over and over and over. You can work with a mala necklace or bracelet. This mala has 108 beads, so one full round around it is one prayer. My favorite mantras that I've worked with are "Be free for me." That's just my favorite. "Free of fear, full of love." I always sing and chant that as I'm going into the nest because it's kind of scary going into a nest of bees. And I want them to know that I'm not afraid of them and that I am full of love for them. So, "Blessed be, divine infinity lives within me." That one is just a constant reminder. I might be walking down the street and see roses and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's divine. Divine infinity lives within me, and I'm seeing that reflecting me. And finally, the last one is "Loka samasta sukhi no bhavantu." That one is Sanskrit and it translates to "May all beings everywhere be happy and free." And that is the prayer that I will leave you with. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. And that's all. Okay.